on the situation in Ukraine, and NATO leaders have warned Vladimir Putin is looking for an excuse to deploy weapons of mass destruction, and that includes chemical weapons and potentially a nuclear bomb. World leaders, they have met for an extraordinary day of summits in Belgium on the 1-month anniversary of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Joining us live is Aidan Smith, Senior Advisor for Progress Data. Great to see you, Aidan. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me.
Aidan, 1 month in, what sort of excuse is Vladimir Putin needing to deploy weapons of mass destruction, do you think?
Absolutely. And, I came on, I believe, last time in January before the invasion even happened, and just thinking of how the amount of absolute destruction and just unfathomable horrors that have happened in this time, I think especially for people in the younger generation who did not grow up during the Cold War, do not really appreciate that international security rather, is always in peril in some way or another. And I think a lot of the shock generally that we're seeing is a result of kind of a bubble bursting there. And when we think of weapons of mass destruction, I think every viewer would be familiar with the concepts of mutually assured destruction, how the only reason that the Cold War didn't go hot was because of, nuclear deterrence, leading one side to not employ weapons of mass destruction as to not lead off a chain reaction. In this case, even though there has been a lot of progress in the last few decades with nuclear disarmament on both sides of the US-Russia divide, what we're still seeing is that nuclear threat is very much still there. So when we're thinking about if Putin would deploy weapons of mass destruction, whether tactical nuclear weapons is a term a lot of security experts tend to use, or chemical or biological weapons, we're dealing with basically someone who could either be described as a madman from some vantage point or as a very calculated evil genius. But either way, the Kremlin is obviously very opaque. And this is just kind of uncharted territory. And of course, the worry, not to get too long on this, but of course, the worry is that if Putin does feel humiliated, if this does look like it's extending too far, instead of trying to cut his losses and just achieve an annexation of Donbass and the eastern region, he might do something like employ tactical nuclear weapons, possibly either in a rural area or in an urban center. But either way, that would be just uncharted horrors for the world.
And we have just seen with Sally Lockwood's report in Ukraine the absolute devastation in places all over the place, including, of course, at Mariupol, where there's over 100,000 people remain trapped, and certainly so many more in other areas of Ukraine. Russia's army, Aidan, is certainly calling it the first phase being over in its military campaign. And next is, as you mentioned, to concentrate on the eastern Donbass region. I mean, this is just absolutely unfathomable. And we've got Joe Biden in Warsaw announcing new sanctions on Russia, but also welcoming the 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, certainly far less than Poland, who have taken over 2 million at this stage.
Absolutely. And one of the things that people have mentioned is that obviously because we are in a nuclear world, there's very limited options in this context. In any other context, Russia would be a pariah state. It wouldn't even have soft power. It would be it is an international disgrace, but because it obviously has the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth, they have to treat this just utterly horrifying regime as, still a legitimate government. And when thinking about how not just the Biden administration, but also European leaders, how Chancellor Scholz, other Western European leaders who are now looking to up their own military deterrent through increased defense funding. With the United States, of course, we are already leading other nations in terms of defense funding across the board. So in terms of the general responses, as you mentioned, looking to welcome 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, I think that a lot of Americans would also say that America could do even larger. The United States is a massive country, and 100,000 is, a very good start. But when we're just thinking of the amount of people just fleeing this utter devastation and terror, I think that the international community, even though there's been a lot of welcome signs in terms of collaboration on this issue, I think that more could be even done, especially as this war goes even further on in coming months, presumably, unless hopefully there will be a peace agreement that respects Ukrainian sovereignty in the very, very near, immediate future.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. But unfortunately, it doesn't look that way as yet. I mean, but we do have, the US and EU announcing that major deal just yesterday on the liquefied natural gas in an attempt to reduce Europe's reliance on the Russian energy. But we're going to have to wrap it up. But just quickly, I wanted to bring in the sad news of Madeleine Albright this week, died of cancer at the age of 84. Incredible life, incredible achievements, the first woman to hold the office of Secretary of State in the US.
Absolutely. And, when you're thinking of Secretary Albright, this is someone who, even after her career in office, she was just such a presence in Washington through the Albright Stonebridge Group is, I believe, the name of the firm that she founded. This is someone whose, influence in American civic affairs goes back so many decades and, remain long lasting well after 2001 when she left office. So, yeah, absolutely. Just kind of like a monumental loss of someone who was so extraordinarily influential in the final part of the 20th century.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Aidan, for your insights and your expertise today. Take care and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much.